Great. Okay. So the reason that we wanted to host this webinar is because as we were building out our new course, as we've been working with pirates in the Category Design Academy and Strategy Therapy, what is my superpower is one of the biggest questions that we get all of the time. And so we wanted to just spend the next hour and kind of explain to you what that is. Maybe you've read the mini book, maybe you haven't. I'll share some links in case you all haven't seen the mini book that we've written about it yet. But this is basically just going to start to dig into the high level overview of what is your superpower? We're going to give you a couple of examples. We're going to use some of the frameworks that we share in our new course just because it's the easiest way that we found to explain this to people and to visualize it. So we're going to run through that framework. We're going to go through some examples of our superpowers that and how we found them. We're also going to share a couple of examples from other pirates in our academy and that we know really well we have gotten their permission to share. And we've talked about them a lot in the past. So they're awesome. So we're going to share some other examples. We're going to talk through like a POV positioning statement and how you can go from the Superpower Map framework into this like unique positioning statement. And then we're going to try to have a bunch of time at the end for questions. So make sure you submit those. I'll be monitoring them. Anything goes here. So this is your time to ask us questions about all of this stuff. So, Eddie, why don't you just kind of kick it off with what is a superpower as we define it? And then here are just some things you can kind of look for. But, Eddie, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Yeah. One of the things that we talk about with superpowers is it can be a bit of a tricky thing to nail down because certainly it can be what you think it is in terms of it's something that you are extraordinary at, something that you do faster than a speeding bullet, able to leap tall buildings in a single bound. So it, it you might have a tendency to view it from a I can do this better than other people can perspective, which is, certainly one way of looking at it. We like looking at it in a different way of what is it that you do for others from an outcome perspective that people know you for and repeatedly come to you for as well, right? So, there is this aspect of, certainly, is it Superman's super strength that is his superpower, or is it his empathy, inability to see things ahead of time, or whatever else it is? And so, the whole kind of exercise that we're doing is not purely just an intellectual, rational one, but it's an emotional one and a relational one. You probably are going to need to do some introspection and talking to other people and asking them realistically, like, what is my superpower? Is it what I think it is? Because oftentimes uh, it may not be what you want it to be. Maybe you dreamt, of being somebody else, having a certain title or a certain reputation, and that the thing that but the problems that people ask you to solve are wildly different than what you were expecting. And that can take some humility and a willingness to kind of see that. It also takes an other-centeredness, the ability to see an outcome for others in a way that matters to them, and not just in a way that you would count it. So the accounting can be different. And then the last bit is, there's this kind of framework that people know. I forget who's the name of it, but there are things that you are, consciously incompetent at, and then all the way up to you are unconsciously competent at. There are certain things that you do that are not only kind of deeply rooted in problems that people know you for, they're amazing outcomes, but then also you may not know that it is unique or special. Kind of like a fish in water is like, well, what do you mean? It just kind of happens all the time. And so that's part of the trickiness of this. And so, we're hopeful in the course, we'll give you examples, give you ideas, give you inspiration, give you some hard challenges for what that might actually look like. And so it's not a straightforward process. I would also say that, at least for me, my journey in discovering my superpower has taken a lot of years to kind of figure out, and it has evolved over time. And so I just want to encourage you, if you feel like you kind of grasped it, but it's like a fish that's kind of slipping out, that's okay. Because it is a journey, it is a process of discovery. And partly why we're excited to have you all here is that you need other pirates to help you figure this out along the way, too. So we're grateful to have you on the pirate ship.
Christopher, do you want to comment off that? You are on mute.
Yeah, I think it's a powerful insight when you realize that it's not the thing that is your passion. Follow your passion. That's really dumb advice. Um, but when you think about what you're good at and what your passion is versus what do people come to you for naturally, another sort of side component of thinking about that is, we've written a lot about reputation capital. And a simple way that we think about it is your reputation is what people say about you when you're not there. That's what your reputation is. And so, um, if you're going to build success, you've got to build it around creating legendary relationship capital that drives that flywheel. And so, that's not necessarily, you might be passionate about painting, but suck at it. I'm passionate about skiing. Really, I love it. You know how many people are going to pay to watch me ski? Fucking zero. My mother won't watch me ski. Nobody will watch me ski except for my buddies if they're skiing with me. And it's one of my biggest passions in life. And so it's a really broken lens, like a lot of the, self-help 101, hustle porn, BS, motivational garbage stuff. And so this insight, what is it that people say about you when you're not in the room in the context of what do they come to you for? I know a guy who's in his mid 70s and he's a very successful, incredibly successful psychiatrist, medical doctor, psychiatrist, and has been at UCSF and Stanford and done all these amazing things. And he was sharing his story with me, and he was originally going to be a baby doctor. But he said from the time he was a little boy, people came to him with their problems, even older people. And he was just kind of that guy in his friend group. And as he was kind of going down the baby doctor path, he just realized that all his friends kept coming to him for life advice. And, there are those moments in our life where, you know, call it the universe, call it God, call it Fred, taps you on the shoulder and goes, psst, pay attention to that. And in the case of my friend, he really thought he wanted to be a baby doctor. But he realized as he was, even though drawn to that, people were drawn to him for something different. And when he figured that out, he found his work mission in life. And he still loves babies and he still loves children and he's a grandfather today and he has lots of ways of expressing his love and passion for pregnant ladies and families and children. But now he does it primarily as a psychiatrist. And so it's really interesting if we start to shift our lens from what's my passion? And I really like painting. Okay, well, that's nice. And 0.0000% of the painters in the world ever making money. And maybe you want to go do that, that's fine. Or you shift the lens and you say, what do people naturally come to you for? And then you start thinking about that. And then you ask why. And then you ask why again. And you ask why again. And you begin to open up the aperture of what might be the superpower or powers that you have that you've been less aware of, let's say it that way, because we've all been trained to, what's your passion? Follow that.
Okay, so to make this a little bit practical, yes, Christopher, I agree with you 100%. But I'm going to share this framework that we came up with. Um, so if any of you have heard of the Ikigai circle, it's a similar framework to that, I guess, but we have adjusted it to fit within the category design principles and how we see it. So there's four different components of this. It's related to the outcomes that you drive for others, which is what Christopher was just talking about, the problems that you solve. So, okay, so I've driven this outcome and that solved this problem, right? The super consumers that you serve. So these are the people who really, really, really need you to solve that problem for them and who you drive outcomes for. And then your unique point of view. And this is kind of your category point of view, that sound bite that people will repeat back when someone says like, "Oh, Katrina, what does she do?" It's what they're going to say about you, essentially. Eddie, do you kind of want to dive a little bit more into each of these and how they all come together?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So I'll share a story of probably the most pivotal, one of the more pivotal client experiences I had that for my career was the work I did for Keurig, which was if I think about um, I'll start with the problem that we were solving, right? Um, I had always approached my job as an analytical, strategic problem, and this was wildly different, right? Because the problem that they were facing, this is in 2011, they were growing like crazy. From 2011 to 2015, they grew from $1 billion to $4.5 billion. And but forecasting was extremely difficult. And so they had a lot of bumps in terms of their quarterly earnings was a complete disaster to a grand success, but nobody was happy, and that it attracted a lot of Wall Street attention. So those of you who may know David Einhorn, famous hedge fund guy, came out with a famous bear thesis in short, was saying like, there's no way you could be growing that fast. It must be accounting fraud or shenanigans or some sort. And that he was kind of battling them. And so the problem that I was solving was really one of like, well, how high is high for the single serve coffee category, right? And that's a problem that I had solved before, but not in a specific way. Like historically, it had been for the CEO so that they can make resource allocation decisions, so that they can make strategy decisions. But what I didn't realize, and they didn't really tell me this, was that no, we're hiring you so that we can put you and your firm's name on our quarterly earnings deck and say, this guy and these people say the category is yay big, so get off our back, David Einhorn. And I didn't realize that they were doing that, right? So so that the outcome that they wanted was not necessarily a true strategy effort. Like they were going to do single serve coffee regardless. Um, oh, you hear that? That was it. Siri talking to me there. Um, hold on. Let me turn Siri off here.
Can Siri make you a coffee and bring it to you yet? Or do
Apparently,
you have the
Not
Siri
now.
robot
Not
installed
now,
yet?
Siri.
that was weird. Siri, talk about missing the outcome. Way behind now. But anyway, the but so the outcome was really about reducing volatility. And getting short hedge funds that were short against them off their backs, getting the SEC off their backs. Like I didn't realize my work would be a subject of a deposition down the road. So like it was a wildly different problem than I was accustomed to solving. But I think to the point that, Kat, you were bringing up, it was the super consumer was with somebody who knew me from prior work at Gillette, prior work at other places, knew that I had a unique way of kind of sizing the prize, using super consumers to predict the future, and et cetera with it. And so they weren't looking for me to help them in the traditional way. They were looking for me to help them in a way that was very public versus very private, for a very different stakeholder, and basically to kind of get the heat off their back by turning the heat on me a little bit. So that was very, very much a turning point for me to understand the power of the work that I was doing was not analytic, it was emotional. It was not quantitative, it was about courage. Because I will tell you that as I was doing the work, that kind of like the scene where you have in a movie where it's, if you want to volunteer for this crazy assignment, take a step forward and everybody else takes a step back. The other partner on the project fell back. The other partners at my firm would not support my thesis. They were like, you can't make that claim. You have no basis for knowing in the future how big it'll be. And I was like, okay. So I felt pretty much kind of on alone, on an island there. If I had known Christopher there, he would have backed me up for sure. Um, but that whole kind of exercise was a deeply humbling one because I had somebody who was a super consumer mind who did not want me from my intellect or my analytic skills or my strategy perspective. They wanted me to be kind of, this is kind of an extreme version. They wanted me to be the first round of the U.S. soldiers at Normandy. If I got shot down, that'd be okay, right? But if uh, it ended up being we were off by a year, basically, pretty much on point with the projection. And I wouldn't say that it necessarily quelled the shorts, but it gave senior management the confidence to execute in a way to kind of shut the noise out and say, okay, We got third-party validation. The size of prize is huge. We should keep going against it. And the reason why they were missing their forecast was they were being conservative. The size of prize work allowed them to be much more courageous about it and therefore take a stand that they weren't willing to do beforehand, invest capital ahead. And so all of that to be said, that was a wildly illuminating, humbling, and and a process that I was not ready for, but I'm very, very grateful for. And that my hope is that for you all, that you have a similar experience without maybe the lights as bright and maybe not as public as it was for me, but it was really, really valuable because I didn't touch. I was like, which one of the circles am I missing? And I was like, oh, POV. Thanks, Scott. The POV was when it comes to category design and new categories, you're going to be wrong at predicting the future. However, if it's truly a new category and you are on the good part of the S curve, you should be wrong aggressive, not wrong passive. That was the point of view that came out. And that was the point of view, I think probably in a way that most, you have that famous McKinsey analysis of cell phones. Remember this, Christopher? Like, this is like 25 years ago. They're like, oh, the market's only going to be 900,000, right? And that the classic problem that most consultants have is they are wrong on the forecast conservative, but when it comes to new categories, you need to be wrong aggressive. And so that was the big POV for me. And I think my willingness to do that in a world where most of my peers were not willing to put their reputations at stake. So you might call it foolhardy for me, but it was something that I enjoyed and I was willing to do. And I knew that it would work out better for me than not. So that was kind of my experience through this. And so, but if you can hear me animated because it is, I don't know, 2/3 emotion, 1/3 rational.
Absolutely. Christopher, I think it's your turn.
Yeah, another context point I want to bring to this is what's going on broadly in the world. So AI is doubling in smartness, depending on who you want to believe, somewhere between every 6 to 10 months. And some people say it's a little longer than that. If you bang around and ask people or you grok it out and chat GP it out, sometimes you'll hear, well, it's really every 2 years. Some people argue, yeah, but on this dimension, it's every, whatever. The bottom line is this. If you're a regular user of any of the major AIs, Claude, Grok, ChatGPT, Perplexity, Dyslexity, Flintexity, and Agazekity, um, what you'll notice is you can actually see that stuff get more powerful on a fairly regular basis because they're always doing new drops, right? And we work with those technologies all the time. We're in it all the time as creators, and we can see it improve. Sometimes in like a few days, you'll be in it, you're like, holy shit, it couldn't do this at this level a couple days ago. Okay, so what's the big aha here around creator capitalist and in particular, your career? Here's the aha. And we don't understand why this is on the cover of every major publication every freaking day right now. And it goes like this. Roughly 70, maybe 80-ish almost years ago, Peter Drucker wrote a book. I believe it was called The Land of Tomorrow, something like that. I read it back in the day, although I'm not quite that old. But and in that book, he, for the first time, designs the category of what today we all know to be knowledge worker. And a knowledge worker is somebody who gets paid to apply high-end knowledge to affect an outcome. And the reason many of our parents wanted us to be doctors, lawyers, accountants, nurses, etc., is those are high-end knowledge worker jobs. And you go to a high-end institution, you learn high-end knowledge, and then you get paid for your time to apply that knowledge to affect an outcome. Well, here's where we're at. I just saw a post yesterday, and if you need me to, I can bring it up on Mario Nafal's feed about, I believe it was a 14-year-old who, using multiple different AIs, created some shit that sits on top of it to analyze symptoms of heart patients. And the kid using the AI was right 90 something percent of the time. And the average heart doctor on the set of topics that this is dealing with was right about half the time. Okay, so if we're now at a point where AI is more powerful than our highest end medical professionals, that's telling us something. And the thing that it's telling us is the value of existing knowledge is dropping every day. And the value of people and tech, for that matter, that can create net new knowledge, net new thinking, net new products and services is increasing every day. And we believe this is the biggest fundamental shift in the definition of work since the Industrial Revolution, since the emergence, therefore, after that Industrial Revolution, the emergence of white collar knowledge workers. Because the future belongs not to those who can acquire and regurgitate, but create. And so when we think about our superpower, the context we think you should think about your superpower is what's the problem that you solve? What's the difference that you make that few others do that is the most valuable, that is the most difficult to be replicated by AI itself or without a human plus AI? Because going forward, it won't be about the application of knowledge. It will be about the creation of knowledge. And a creator capitalist is somebody who can create and capitalize on net new, whether it's for themselves or their employer. And so when we're zooming in on our superpower, that's what we're looking for. What is the thing that makes you unique, AKA your difference, that people come to you for, that you have unique intellectual capital around and capability around, that you can do that few others can the way you can do it, and ideally using AI. And the people who get that right, connect their different superpower to making a difference in an ongoing creative way with AI, are literally going to be the most creative, innovative, and dare we say wealthy people to ever live. And those who don't, ugh.
Can I just jump in real quick? I know Ken, it's gonna slow things down a little bit, but
No,
like
go ahead,
I
Eddie.
I recorded a business case video for HBR like years ago, and it pops up occasionally. People are like, oh, I saw your video, and then the framework was like, how do you write a business case to present to the board of directors, to the CEO, to your investors, to whatever, right? And the framework I had, it was you need three F's, not Christopher's F's, but three different F's. You need facts, you need faith, and you need fortitude. And at some level, I think that your superpower will incorporate all three. But I think in the context of what Christopher's saying, in a world where AI is like exponentially smarter on a regular, ongoing basis, the facts part becomes a commoditized, and the faith and the fortitude part becomes much more important. And what I mean by that is when you have the circles correct, it allows you to have faith that you can solve the problem at hand, right? Because you're famous for the problem that you have. You have a unique and differentiated point of view. You have outcomes that you can point to, and you have super consumers that they are the sweet spot for when this can happen. So then when you come across, I saw Lydia in the chat, hello Lydia, she has faith that for legal tech startups that they can quadruple their funnels because she has seen what it looks like before she gets involved, and then she jumps in and then she fixes it and converts and does all the magic things that she does, and lo and behold, it's 4 times larger than it was, right? And it's that faith which is predicated on the circle diagram, but also that gives you the fortitude. Christopher has a saying, sometimes, clients will rent his balls, is what he will say, right? And that you have the faith to say you can get there in a way that you didn't believe that the superpower is possible. And then you can lend them your fortitude about staying the course, about believing what can happen until the outcome is realized. And so, like, I just wanted to underscore this part of like, so much of this is, we have a lot of videos. And one of the funny things, like, Kat was really insistent, like, we need to get these new cameras so that we can make eye contacts and we're not just kind of looking at this way and that way, whatever. And we're like, Christopher and I were the old native analog, like, are you sure we really need this and whatever? And there was a lot of hee haw to get Christopher set up and everything. But what I think one of the values is of the course is to get a set of videos with Christopher staring at you pupil to pupil, and telling you that you can do it so that you can tell somebody else that they can do it as well too. Because no matter how good AI gets, I just don't believe it will give you a surrogate for having the faith that the impossible can be done and having the fortitude to see it all the way throughout. And that's where you come in. And that's why knowing that superpower with deep clarity is so important.
Yeah, I'm talking to Lydia right now. Lydia, if you want to pop in, I think it would be kind of interesting to share your experience going through all of this. Um,
Hey,
can,
Kat, I'm here.
okay, we can hear you.
I don't look my best. Okay.
That's okay. We can leave your video off.
I,
That's
I got
fine.
it. Oh, no, I'll go on. I'll go
Why
on.
is it almost always women who don't want to turn their cameras on? What is that?
Well, you never know what we're all doing, we're
Well,
multitaskers. We do
I've
like
got,
six
I
things in the
didn't put my
background.
makeup on today either, Lydia, if that's the problem. And I didn't do my hair.
no, 'cause I've been working like helping lawyer founders, legal tech founders build legendary companies, which means when you're building, you're in it. So
You're
I'm
in
happy
it.
to go on camera.
Okay. Why don't you start talking and then I'll
It
promote
would
you
be
to
nice to see you,
panelist.
but you
Yes.
decide.
Okay, no, I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm working on. I'm actually working on building category defining language on a website. So no, I'm happy to go on.
Okay. All
Hi,
right. Well,
everyone. I'm super excited to be here. Every time I kept seeing the Creator Capital workshop and that this was happening, I couldn't wait to go on just because okay, here I am, or attend, join as a panelist.
fine. Anyways, um, so Lydia is someone who, wait, are you there, Lydia?
Did we just lose her?
Oh, and look at how awesome. I'm wearing pink, hot pink.
There you
Perfect.
are. You
We've
look
got
That's the
you.
great.
brand.
We think
Um,
you're a powerhouse, Lydia.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. So I love being part of the Category Design Academy, and I always say it, and the pirates have heard me say this. It has changed my life. It truly has, because it has given me clarity to what is my superpower, what is my point of view, and what was the thing that generated legendary and epic outcomes for others. And I'm here today because you just, as Eddie said, it's like you keep thinking about it, you keep refining it, you keep. Today, I had three people call me because they were three lawyer founders, so I'm starting to narrow that down, who literally were like, I can't build pipeline. I don't know what's happening. Someone yesterday called and said, Lydia, I'm really struggling with, I'm just not getting the right clients. And I said, look, I'm going to go look at your messaging and what you're saying on LinkedIn. I said, you know what? I don't know who you're talking to. Like, that's the problem here, right? So it's all about what is your superpower, your category, does what you are as a category creator. But I will say that for me, being able to be part of the Design Academy, really start to have deep reflection. I mean, I think I've even written that it was hard work. But when you start to talk to others, as Christopher said, what are the problems they come to you for? What is that unique outcome that you're generating? And actually to start to write it and reflect over time, you start to see patterns that you didn't see before. And you start to go, wow, like I did all these amazing things to achieve outcomes for others. And I actually think when you start to quantify it, it's completely transformative because I can say I helped build and scale 5 companies that had, this is what I say quite a bit, I helped build and scale 5 legal tech companies that launched new categories of technology that had never been created before, ever. And I have built companies from the ground up. And so I have a unique superpower that knows how to do that very quickly, that generated, billions of dollars in revenue, that have generated a pipeline. I have the numbers. I don't have it off of my head, but I didn't articulate things like that before. And as you
So,
know,
Lydia, I have a question for you. So, as you were thinking about your superpower, what do you think was one of the most helpful? Is there a specific unlock or something that you did in order to maybe it was talking to other people, really doing some personal reflection, like when people are thinking through, well, I don't know, like we're having a discussion in the chat. I don't know if I've delivered any quantifiable outcomes for people, right? That's a huge fear and a huge
It is.
sticking point. So what kind of helped you get over that block?
Oh, and see, I never thought that I did that, right? Like I would think I was the person behind the scenes building pitch decks, helping the sales reps. Like I was the person behind the scenes and I never saw it like this was the outcome I'm delivering until people, when I went in the design academy, you go, part of the workshop or the work is asking these questions. And then I would talk to someone and they'd say, Lydia, my God, you completely enabled me to go and have like the right conversations. Like if you didn't do that, we wouldn't have gotten here. There was a CEO that I sometimes will say, like I would do some ghostwriting for him. And one day he said, you really, you really contributed to my success. And I would have never known these things. Sometimes you just forget to tell people things in the moment. But then when you, as a pirate or, creator capitalist, go out and start to really research this, not in a way where you're kind of, you know, sometimes I think people are uncomfortable asking or thinking about their outcomes, but actually going, how did I help you? I'm really interested. That's very powerful.
And Lydia, we have to ask them, right? Because we have an opinion,
Yeah.
but I know when I discovered this for myself, my opinion of what I thought was my superpower and the way people identified it was different. And ever since the people educated me, it's no, well, here, I actually asked a top venture capitalist this almost 20 years ago now. I said, why do you call? And the answer he gave me changed everything because he was clear about my superpower in a way that I wasn't. And I was already a successful category designer and three-time CMO and I still didn't really know. And so it's one of those things that's almost impossible to do ourselves. We certainly have tried to surface it with the exercises in Creator Capitalist and the exercises that are very similar that you did in the academy. And I think that really helps people. But of course, one of the things we encourage you to do is ask others because
Yeah.
there will be an unlock, right, Lydia?
Yes, absolutely. And so what I will say is that I'll never forget, I asked someone, I said to my friend, what do you see as my superpower? She said, Lydia, you're the builder. She goes, you're the one that is the builder. Like you get in and you analyze the systems, the processes, the people, and how are you going to tie this together to get everyone aligned and moving forward, but in a different, like the same way, in a different way. It's in a different way. It's actually about the people, I think, which is my superpower. I don't think, but I will say that it was an unlock to be able to reflect on it that way and then to really start to refine the languaging. And the languaging comes through writing, which also is something you have to lean into. And when I started writing, I actually think that that was the second piece. First, writing within the academy and being in a community where you feel, I think for me it was kind of safe because as I said, I was always behind the scenes. Now now I feel comfortable talking about it in an external way. But I will say, and to Christopher's point, AI. So I actually believe the same idea that you have to harness AI, and I'm a big AI enthusiast, but to be able to go, how do I then take my superpower and become a force multiplier in a way that I never thought, like, because it is extraordinary what you can do. I mean, extraordinary.
Can I jump
Absolutely.
in real quick?
Yeah.
I love this, Lydia, because like what you're number one, we talk about relationship capital. One of the
Yeah.
subsets of people of that is upside estimators, right? So people who have seen
Yeah.
Lydia, you in action, people who have felt the benefit, the abundance that you unlock. And so you got to ask people, like for all the people in the chat, if you don't know, you probably haven't asked. And guess what? We'll tell you a dirty little secret. When we have these conversations and we say, someone says, I don't know my superpower, and we say, you got to go ask, the most common response is, I'm too scared to ask. So just be aware. This is an emotional exercise as much
It
as it is
is.
an intellectual
It
one.
is. And a
This
very, oh, sorry, Eddie,
no, keep going. Yeah.
very reflective. I mean, it is not something you're going to uncover in a weekend. I mean, we're talking about really deep thinking I would take long walks and I would just really think about this, and I would take a notepad and write it out, and then I'd reflect, and I'm still working on it, right? I keep still refining it. But I will say relationship capital. So I have just two quick stories, but so I have started my advisory work, and I work with lawyer founders, because I think that there is a very unique problem to solve, because in law school you don't learn sales, you don't learn go to market. So I'm able to guide them in that journey and help them build epic companies, as I like to say. But I will tell you, when I went on this journey, and Eddie knows, I started writing about these problems, and I started getting a lot of people reaching out. The people that were reaching out were people I worked with for years. And they go, Lydia, what you wrote about today is this problem I'm having, you know, and we talk about it. So I don't even have a website. And I have 7 engagements that I'm working on. And I think of, actually, Eddie, I was thinking of you because one of my clients today said, we just love working with you. We have another company. Could you help us with that one? I said, yeah. And then yesterday I was meeting with someone, and for some reason I had to, but I tell you this because I go, wow, I'm very grateful that I built those relationships over my career, that when my friends or colleagues would come to me for something, I just I just would talk to them. It was never I think it's that missionary sort of perspective of, you just want to be radically generous with the people in your network, in your sphere, because it will always come back to you, especially in building your reputation. So I feel very lucky, very grateful, I will say.
Wow. I
Wow.
think everyone
Thanks,
who's worked
Lydia.
with you, Lydia, also feels that way. And I think the relationship capital, getting to listening and introspection, the languaging, if you heard Lydia say,
Mhm.
Lydia, you're a builder. The word choice matters a great deal. And you got to listen to that. And the third one, talking about long walks, like when Kat Christopher and I were in a writing retreat doing all the creator capitalist stuff in Hawaii, Lydia had reached out, and I was like, let's get on the phone. And I was walking at 5 a.m. through the area,
Mhm.
and then we were talking about it. But third one, valuing your value. Do you
Yeah.
remember this conversation, Lydia? Like Lydia was describing all the great outcomes, and I was like, I think you need to quadruple your pricing or something along those lines.
That is, yes,
And so all those things, this is an extremely
it's,
emotionally roller coastery of a process. And so, it was funny, like um I suspect the folks who join the course were going to say, this isn't what I thought it was. And that's 100% by design. And it in no way, like, I was, we've opened the course this week, and I was all excited. I'm like, oh, wait a minute, we're not going to see it. We have to be a little patient for the outcomes,
mhm.
because it's going to take some time to process. And oh shoot, my value isn't what I thought it was. My superpower is different. Do I want it to be? Why did they use this word? Why not this other word that I wanted? Like, it's a very much kind of feeling your way through the dark sometimes.
Yes,
Yeah,
I
I
agree.
do. I do. We do have a couple of questions, so I want to be able to make sure we get to those as well. So someone asked, I think Mahin asked, what's the specific guidance for people at the start of their career? So if you don't have, maybe you're unsure, I can speak to this a little bit, and then I'm curious to hear what you all think. So when I started out as a junior copywriter at an education technology startup, which is funny because, haha, I'm in education today, with you all. And when I quit after a year and a half to go do my own
Well,
thing and
Kat, there's
become
education and there's education.
there's education and there's education
There's pirating.
and there's pirating. And I drove a couple of good outcomes at that job. Like I started an Instagram account for the company, which like is today's TikTok, I guess you can call it. At the time, like they didn't have Instagram, they didn't know what it was. It became their biggest social media platform. There was a lot of things that happened in the year and a half that I was there, and I was figuring out. I knew I was good at writing, but I wasn't sure of the specifics of what writing meant because that's a huge category, right? And it took me a couple years. It took me working with a lot of people. It took me, I had to try almost every different type of writing to figure out what I liked to do. I wrote, you know, articles that were more the journalism thing. I wrote Facebook campaigns for products. I wrote website copy. I wrote email copy. Like I wrote any kind of copy that you could possibly imagine to figure out like one, what did I like to do, but two, also what kind of copy was I good at that drove outcomes for other people. And it seemed to be the kind of copy that not only did I enjoy, but it worked really well for the people I was working with. And ultimately, what that came down to over time was I really liked entrepreneurship. I really liked writing. I really liked long form content. I wasn't really into social media and ad campaigns and things like that I was doing for people. And what that merged into eventually was becoming an editor for ghostwriting for thought leadership. So I was basically interviewing entrepreneurs, working with a writer, editing the pieces, the long form pieces, and then posting them online. And it took me 3 years out of my career, like after the start of my career, to really get into that. And at that point, I felt, okay, I enjoy doing this. I like doing this. I'm really good at doing this. I should probably continue along this thread. And, that's kind of where I landed today with helping people and helping pirates create this kind of long form content, create educational content, create this category pirate Substack. But I had to experiment and do a lot of different things at the start of my career in order to figure out what that superpower was. So if any, Christopher, Eddie, if you have any thoughts about that, that was my own personal journey and I'm still on it.
Yeah, I'd add a couple of things. So you could see in Katrina's story, there is an experimentation phase, right? And whenever we're moving into a new domain, a new category of work, there's going to be an experimentation phase. When I started to become a creator, which is 9 years ago today, um, that was a whole new world for me. I went from being well known in the thing that I did in a small part of the world to being an absolute nobody and having to work my way back up from the bottom. And every time we do that, we have to experiment and learn, and then we figure things out, and then we generally find a great sort of category design niche that we can focus in on and begin to scale and develop the four capitals and grow into the new thing that we're working on. So there's a lot of experimentation for sure. The other thing is, let's take some of the bullshit and the romance out of it. For some of us, entrepreneurship or solopreneurship is an act of desperation. And what we're doing is anything to quote our former president, George W. Bush, anything to put food on the family. And so when I started my first business at 18, it wasn't some glamorous, I'm going to share my journey on social media with all my friends and I'm going to be a founder. When I started, everybody thought the word entrepreneur was a French word for unemployed. And it was an act of desperation because I'd gotten thrown out of school. And so I was either going to work manual labor for the rest of my life or do something. And in the answer to the something, I found the software business. It wasn't my passion. Math was over for me in grade 3. I didn't know how to tie a tie when we started our first company, and that was back in the day when we wore ties. Anyway, my point, and I have a young man in my life right now who, very similar to me, failed out of, or maybe he got his GED in the end, but college was not for him. Going to community college was a waste of time. He wanted to be an entrepreneur. He thrashed around. He had some ideas. It didn't go anywhere. I gave him lots of advice. I actually gave him some work with some other entrepreneurs that I knew to help teach him some stuff and make a little bit of money. Anyway, long story longer, he had a friend of the family who has a small advertising business that focuses on creating ad programs for local car dealerships. And this guy had a really good, 2 or 3 person small business doing these marketing programs for car dealerships. Anyway, this guy gave this kid an opportunity to go sell, and away he goes. And he's loving it. And now he loves car dealers, and he loves selling, and he loves marketing, and he loves advertising. And 9 months ago, he didn't know anything about that world. Why did he do that? Desperation. And he was just lucky that there was a friend of a family that took a shining to him and opened up a couple doors, and here he is. And I think this young man's now going to go on, and I think he's going to start his own company at some point. And I think he's going to be a very successful salesperson. And he's in his early to mid 20s now. But my point is, he didn't follow, his passion wasn't, oh, let's sell marketing programs to car dealers. No, he was desperate for a job. And he worked and he figured it out and he this friend of the family, and he made his own opportunity out of something that there's no guidance counselor in the world that could have told him that would be the springboard for him.
Absolutely. So a couple of you have asked about like, is there a formula for this? Yes, there is. If you want, consider this a starting point, right? We came up with this as this is where you begin. So this is the problem like positioning statement we share in the course. So we're actually going to have a ton of examples of other people filling this out, which I'm super excited about. But it's pretty simple, right? I help insert super consumers. You help achieve whatever outcomes you help them achieve by solving the problem you help them solve with your point of view. So they go from here to there. And Eddie, we have an example from you. So if you wanna talk through this, I'm gonna paste the formula in the chat so everyone can copy it. But let's go to your example so people can see what this looks like. And Eddie, if you kind of want to talk through how you got here, that would be helpful.
Yeah, no, thanks, Kat. I think the Keurig experience was very much, so 2011 is what, 14 years ago or so. So kind of at the, call it midpoint of my career, so the super consumer was a really interesting point was, as a, consulting partner, generally speaking, you don't work with category creators. Because as you are trying to, put food on your family or on your firm in this situation, you kind of sort of have to go where the big budgets are, which means you have to go to the large firms, large clients, and therefore they're far less likely to be a category creator than not. So this was kind of the first pivot was when I met the Keurig folks, the work that I did for them was the largest single expense that they had ever paid. They had to go to the board to get approval. It was that kind of a thing versus a company that was like, back, 25 years ago, the joke was you'd walk the halls at AT&T and like, bazillion-dollar projects would just get thrown at you just down the hallway because they were such a big super consumer of consulting. And then the billion-dollar outcome was, I think, a very helpful clarifying thing for me was that my version of a 10x outcome for that was the outcome that I was routinely called out for by clients. It's like, oh, you've generated $1 billion here, $1 billion there. And then, part of the subtle niching down for me was like, when you do that for an $80 billion company, a $1 billion outcome is nice, but doesn't really move the needle. But you do it for a hyper growth category creator, it does make a big difference in the valuation and everything. And that ultimately, where I further niched down was, and this you might call this a little bit of cheating, but it is certainly no small trick to get a stagnant or declining firm to grow. That is hard. Not just the strategy part, but some of the reason why they are not growing or they're declining is cultural. Some of the reason is because they have a very, very large and powerful revenue prevention department, as Christopher likes to say. So what I ended up swapping out was like, I didn't want to work for those types of companies, even though those companies paid the bills. And I wanted to work for companies that they knew they were creating something new. And from a category perspective, they didn't have a revenue prevention department, but they were scared to invest further because they didn't know how high was high. So I would do that. And you can see the weird data, super consumers, super geos, that's all the work that I've been doing over the course of my career. And the ability to go from guessing to confidently investing was the main kind of Frodo that they were achieving is, not only from an internal CapEx perspective where CFOs could make those kind of decisions, but B, more importantly, and I think, I'll quote Christopher yet again, two types of investors, those that invest in performance and those that invest in potential. And that, oftentimes the reason why there's a high beta and volatility in a stock is because it's a fight between the two investors. The ones who are investing in potential are like, this is an amazing company. Let's value it on a multiple of revenue. The ones that are investing in performance are like, you guys suck. You missed the quarterly numbers and you guys are never going to make it and you're probably fraudulent, whatever. And so my superpower was to help them win the battle, kind of the angel versus demon on the shoulders of which investors are they going to listen to and have the loudest voice. And it was so instructive for me because what it meant was to be honest about my superpower statement meant a series of things. The big one meaning I had to leave my firm, right? Because what I laid out was I cannot work with large client or companies. I cannot. I have to work with people who are in a battle of potential versus performance investors. Typically, not a publicly traded established company that has an investor base or a dividend stock. Many of my clients early in my career, they were largely dividend stocks. That's kind of what they were known for. And so it required a pretty significant set of choices and shifts that have been, ultimately it's worked out great, been very personally rewarding, but not always the safest and most certain path for me to take because I think, most of my peers that I grew up with are still in consulting in some way, shape, or form. Because consulting does not attract risk takers. It actually attracts very risk averse people. So.
Thanks, Eddie. So I want to make sure we answer. We have about 5, 6 minutes left. I want to make sure we answer anybody else's questions about this. I see there's been a lot of questions going off in the chat. If you have anything else, let us know. We could also run through, if nobody has questions, we can run through Holley's Superpower Map. We have an example if people just want to kind of hear another example from another pirate that we know well. And we can keep answering questions as they come in. So let me share Holley's Superpower Map. So Eddie, do you want to walk through this one?
Sure. So Holley's is great. So she is the founder of Gray Matter Marketing, but before that, she was a stud marketer, category designer for a lot of med tech companies. And when she was the director of, I think, global brand for Allergan for one of their aesthetic products, when what she discovered was the problem that she solved for, was great product, wrong playbook, right? Because the way that most aesthetic companies grow and a lot of software companies grow is you want to grow, add more sales reps. You want to grow, make the sales comp plan bigger and better, whatever else it is, right? And what she was able to do, she took a product that was 25 million in revenue and got it to 100 million in 4 years. Same sales number of sales reps, same amount of marketing. She just reframed the problem to be one of a new category, not of existing competition. And so she did all of those things, right? And so this whole kind of idea of it's not just healthcare; it is actually a radically different point of view. We can't go into very specifically for her own client, but ultimately, what she discovered was um, it was a bit of an anomaly. Allergan is the 800-pound gorilla in aesthetics, and she did it because at some level it was a little bit of an orphan product or category division that no one was really paying attention to, and so that she had an opportunity to really do some magic with. And as a result of that, she became known as the marketer who could quadruple a business from 25 million to $100 million. And guess what? She wasn't being paid appropriately for that for that outcome, and so she decided, like her story. I forget if I don't think it's come out yet on the podcast, Kat. Right? So when it comes out, it'll be awesome to listen to because she essentially realized her value real time as everybody else was, and so there was this massive fight to try to keep her, to try to recruit her away, and then she was like, you know what? I'm just going to do this on my own and capture all the upside, which is great. But the reason why I bring this up was that I don't know that until there was a bidding war for her, that she realized A, not only what her superpower was, but B, that she had a superpower. And for those of you on the call, like I just think, we're oftentimes so heads down in what we're doing, our deadlines, that you don't have the time to go back and reflect on what it is that you did and did you have an outcome and did you contribute to it in a meaningful way. And so the whole kind of aspect of that is incredibly important because I think we firmly believe that everybody has a superpower. Everybody was made to have a superpower. And if you don't have clarity on it yet, it's just a function of time and effort against it. This one we really, really feel strongly about, as well as the emotional intelligence and the humility to say, oh, shoot, my superpower may not be what I thought it was. I may not be able to describe it what it like. And and you know what? I am willing to kind of face the music and say, all right, Kat, tell me what my superpower is and be honest. Be kind, but be honest about it, right? And that's the part that I think we're so excited about because everyone on the Zoom call, anyone listening to this, you have an amazing superpower. You were made to solve unique problems that only you are designed in the world to do. And until you do that, you're depriving the rest of us in the world from the magic contributions that you can make. So get on this and figure out what it is with or without us. Doesn't really matter. But we want you to go and figure out what your superpower is so that you can benefit the world and yourself through this whole process.
Now, as Eddie says that, what I know is that some people, not me, and I'm sure not you, but some other people will go, that sounds like a bunch of horseshit. That sounds like something that parents say to their little Jimmy or Johnny or Susie. Oh, you could grow up and be anything you want, little Susie, right? And a bunch of people aren't special. They're donkeys. They don't have IQs. They don't have motivation, or they're just not capable, or something else. And this came out recently. I was posting some of our creator capitalist stuff, and I was talking about superpowers. And this guy that I used to know, used to work with, he's a retired Pricewaterhouse Coopers partner that I knew from the 90s. And he sort of fired back with, really? Everybody's special? Everybody can be legendary? Everybody has a superpower? Come on, Lockhead. It's like, look, you can choose that and you could say, oh, no, that's just not true. Some people are exceptional and some people aren't. And you can be kind of a boobert about that. However, here's the aha. We know at the genetic level, every single person is unique. The vast majority of our DNA is the same, of course, but there's a percentage of it that is different, that will never be the same as anybody else again, and is not the same of all the billions that have come before. That's at the DNA level. And we choose a belief. And we choose that belief for multiple reasons that we could get into if you matter, or if it matters, or if you care. But we choose to believe this is true because it's a more enlivening, abundance creating, empowering, motivating lens to choose. That we're all here for a reason. And our job is to find out what that reason is, aka our superpower, aka our different. And then to double down on that. And that we have a sacred obligation to ourselves, to our family, to our community, and to the world. And to those of us who believe things beyond the world, to God. To uncover this superpower, to uncover our different, and use it to make the most meaningful contribution and difference we can to the world. Now, look, you can think that's corny. Some people do. They think it's woo-woo, flu-flu. Oh, Lockhead's been living on the left coast for too long. Okay, fine. But we believe that's a very powerful lens because what that lens says is the old childish saying is true. If it's meant to be, it's up to me. The people who are most successful take radical control over their lives and their careers. They don't accept circumstance. They don't accept excuses, especially their own. And they go for it no matter what. Now, that might sound like motivational mumbo jumbo to you, but we know it works. And so investing the time in yourself to really look at what is my superpower, believing that there is something that makes you different, that even if you don't think you've produced massive outcomes, you've produced something. Look into that something. You've been on a team that produced something. What did the team do? What was your role in the team? Why do they want you on that team? There's something about you. And if you choose that lens, that is to say that I do have a superpower, and my job in life and my work is to connect my superpower, aka my different, to making the biggest difference possible, particularly in an AI world where creating net new things is what's going to drive abundance, and where there's going to be plentiful jobs and opportunities, you can design a legendary life. And the crazy thing about it, and I know this sounds like bullshit to so many, but it's true for us, and it's true for so many people we know. Lydia's a great example. Holly's a great example. You'll meet a whole bunch of others around here. Iron Mike Stedman, many others that we could mention, of people who have designed a career for themselves, creating value for others, such that they would tell you today they get paid to be them. We get paid to be us. I was talking to a friend of mine about this yesterday. Sort of saying, what the hell are you doing now, really? And I said to him, I get paid a ton of money to be me. He said, what are you talking about? I said, well, that's exactly what happens. There's a set of shit I bring to the table, and Category Pirates is created that's valued to other people, and people pay us for that value to just show up and deliver the content, or to meet with them one-on-one, or to jam with them on their creator capital strategy or their one-page strategy, or of course category design, and answering the question, how do I design and dominate a massive category that matters, and how do I create a category of one for myself and my career that matters. These are things we love to talk about, work on, research on, write about. And so today, this is what we get paid for. And some amazing people show up in our inboxes asking us to help them with amazing things. And the things that we do are the things that are the most us. And in my world, anyway, I would say 95% of what I do is get paid to be me. 5%, there's always crapola you got to do. You got to take out the laundry, and you got to wipe your bum, and you got to do the stuff. But for the most part, as insane as it sounds, it is very possible, and we think even more possible today because of technology, to find your superpower, connect that superpower to making a difference, and ultimately make a great living getting paid to be you.
And if that wasn't all the motivation you needed, I don't know what is. But we have one final question, and then we're going to wrap this up because we could talk about this for hours. But Caroline asked, and Eddie, maybe if you want to take this one, is there any specific magical words that you can use to reach out to people to ask them about your superpower? And we've talked about this a lot. It's going to be dependent on you as a person, and we have thoughts about networking. But Eddie, if you want to share your thoughts on what you've done that you've seen work well.
Yeah, no, it's I don't know if these are magical or not, but the way that I've done it is exactly what a version of what Christopher said is, why do you keep calling me, right? Why do you keep asking for help? And you know, I here's how I won't give you the words, but I'll give you the structure of the conversation is like, hey, I'm grateful for our relationship. There's probably a customer, a client, a coworker, an investor, whomever that you've worked with over the time, and you just like acknowledge and express gratitude. I love working with you. I enjoy it because of X, Y, and Z. Can you? I think I know, but I'm actually kind of curious. Is it the same or different for you? Like, what is it that you, assuming you enjoy working with me, what is it that you do enjoy working with? So what do you enjoy about working with me? I also would ask, I know you work with a lot of people kind of like me. I'm curious, what makes me different? What's unique about it? And then the third thing is, uh, if you had to measure or quantify that uniqueness and why you like working with Mike, is there a simple way of doing it? I remember Jim Kiltz, who was the CEO of Gillette and Kraft. He just had a funny way of putting things. Like when you were doing consulting for him, he'd always say, like, if you heard the words, well, Eddie, I'm a simple man. You knew you had screwed up something, like you had made it too complicated or whatever, right? But he would just kind of say, look, every time I hired your firm, I got promoted. I was like, oh, okay. Like, we helped you advance your career. And so, like, I think it's a bit of a acknowledge the relationship and express, appreciation, inquire, if they feel the same or different, what makes you different among that, and how, if you had to measure it, how would you measure it? And if you don't have to use that exact language with it, but I think it's just being willing to step on the scale, as it were, right? Because it's the how would you measure it part is a bit of a tricky thing, but it's a bit like if there was a digital scale and you asked me to step on it in front of everybody, like that's kind of what the feeling is going to be like, right? So you kind of have to be willing to say that, step on the scale, and have your value measured by somebody you respect and respects you. And if you can do those things, then I think you'll be in great shape as a starting point for what your superpower looks like.
Absolutely. All right, we can talk about this forever, but I'm going to come to a close. I didn't see any more questions pop into the chat. You all know where to find us. We're on LinkedIn. If you have
There is a
follow-up
big question in
questions.
here about when category design, from Brian, when category design is the worst growth path. I don't know if we want to deal with that one or leave it for another time, but
If anyone would
it's
like to stick around, if you want to answer it right now, we
that's
can answer
always
it
one of
now.
my fun ones to deal with, and I'd be happy to spend a minute or two on that one, Brian, if you want us to. Otherwise, we can
Go for
pick
it.
it up some other time.
Go for it.
Okay, so let's just look at what the opposite of a category design or category creation strategy is. Let's just start there. So if you're not going to create your own category, that means you're going to, by definition, compete in an existing category. By definition. So what's an existing market? An existing market category. An existing market is a place where there's been a problem/opportunity that has been defined, designed, and accepted by that marketplace. And a set of solutions to that problem have been accepted by that marketplace, and an entire ecosystem has emerged over a period of time to solve that problem with these kinds of solutions. Now, and that's a big market. What's your TAM, total addressable market? Oh, it's an existing market of $25 billion, and we're going to disrupt it with our better product. That's what we're going to do. And all we're going to do is we're going to put on a website a demo of our better product. And when people see how much faster, cheaper, smarter, bigger, slower, whatever our carbidingulator is compared to their carbidingulator, they'll buy our carbidingulator. That's the business strategy that the vast majority of the world takes on. And they get crushed. It's insane. They're fighting in a game created by somebody else. They're in what's called the existing market trap. They're chasing existing demand, often against an entrenched category queen or king. And we know, because we did the research and we published it in HBR, that at least in tech and more in virtually every market category today is a tech one, particularly because of the cloud and AI, and mobile for that matter, are like tech markets. So here's what we know. In tech market categories, one company earns 76% of the value as measured by all of the market caps or valuations of the companies in that market category. So if you want to play the existing market, chase existing demand, compete with a better product, service, price, quality, strategy, by definition, you're competing for 24% of the value from the start. And so, Brian, what we tell people is the riskiest thing you can do in business and with your career is to enter an existing market and play the better game. Because if you do, you're no different than a muscle man in a bikini contest wearing an eeny weeny man bikini with a little number on it that says 47, standing there posing, pick me. My thighs are bigger than his thighs. Pick me, pick me, pick me. And people are purposely comparing you against something else. Legends do not want to be compared against anything. They want all others to be compared to them. They want to create a game in which they win. They become the category queen and earn 76% of the market. Now, on first mover, we love this one. Most people conflate first to ship a product with a certain set of features that are generally reviewed or generally acknowledged to be different, new, a new category of product. And they go, well, Facebook's the category creating social, and that was created by MySpace. It actually wasn't created by MySpace. It was created by CompuServe, and then it was created by GeoCities, and on and on and on. Well, sure, MySpace was in the market with a product first, but they weren't the first to category design the market. That is to say, teach the world to view a problem, in this case, how do I connect with my friends and family in the digital world, through the exact lens that they wanted them to. And I could tell you why Facebook was different, not better, than MySpace. And what happened was Facebook didn't compete with MySpace in any traditional sense of the word. They invented a new, different game in social media. And when the world accepted their design of what a social media is, they won. And so just because you're first to ship a product doesn't mean you're first to make the market category go. And this is where the thinking breaks down. And so the aha here is the greatest risk you can have in your career and in your business is to compete in an existing market trap. The less risky thing you can do is to stand out, is to be different, is to teach the world to think in a unique and new and different way about a unique, new, and different problem or opportunity, and therefore a solution for that. And you're the principal creator of demand, not competitor, if that's a word, for demand. I guess competitor. A competitor is a guy named Peter who competes, a competitor. But I digress. And there's one other thing we could talk about if it mattered. They say, well, I don't want to start with no demand. That's terrible. How do I do that? There's this thing called demand, damming the demand, which is saying you thought you wanted that, but what you really need is this. And you're not competing at the product level, you're competing at the category level, right? It's Peloton versus spinning. Why drive to the spinning class when you can do it at home? They don't say our bikes are better than spinning. They don't say our instructors are better than spinning. They don't say any of that. They promote the different problem. Going to the gym's a pain in the ass, la 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 la. Do it at home. New category. And that's the difference. So how'd I do, Brian?
Brian said great. He loves it every time he hears it from you. And then I think Chris said this is the shit. So
Oh, and there's one other thing about all that. In a conversation that I have with any CEO, founder, or whoever about this, VC, the minute that I realize that they are arguing with me about this, that they sometimes they even say, well, convince me this is right. I've heard this is the dumbest thing you can do. Or words to that effect. Maybe they say it a little bit more nicely than that. I just say, hey, man, you can have the rest of the hour back. We're not in the convincing business. There's a lot of people who think this is stupid. There's a lot of people that think building exponentially different futures and massive new value and becoming the company that creates and dominates that value is a dumb strategy. And they'd rather go build an incrementally better carbon-regulator. That's most people are in the incremental business, not the exponential business. That's fine. Or you might think that everything I just said is bullshit and you have a different point of view around how to go to be exponential. That's fine too. But if you think category design is garbage, then I can give you the rest of the sour back. I'm not going to convince you of shit. See ya. And let me know how it turns out.
mic drop. Metaphorical mic drop. Awesome. Brian, glad that answered your question. Glad we could have that riff recorded for everybody who needs a reminder about why we do what
Steal
we
it,
do.
Chris. Steal it.
Steal it. Steal it, repost it, reshare it. We'll like it. All right, everybody. Well, thank you so much for hopping on. If you have any follow-up questions, you can email us. You can reach out to us on social. You know where to find us. We're on Substack. And if you feel like diving in deeper with us, you can hop into our new Creator Capitalist course because we've already got a bunch of people in there and everybody's jamming on their superpowers and it's awesome so far. So hopefully see you in there. And if not, then I guess see you next time we do one of these. Bye,
Fire it
everyone.
on.
Bye.